Every crime has its backstory and motive that helps law enforcement solve the case and find the perpetrators. However, some cases are so complicated that it's difficult to understand why someone would decide to take another person's life. In today's world, people often have to choose between professional development and personal life. Many focus on their careers, postponing the search for love until later. But sooner or later, the realization of needing a close companion comes. Unfortunately, the search for a partner, especially through the internet, can lead to tragic consequences. Before I dive into this chilling story, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I cover important true crime cases and delve into the psychology of criminals. In the city of Tulsa, Oklahoma, on April 29, 1973, a girl named Tiffany Maher was born. She came from an educated family. Her father was a university professor. Although Tiffany later chose the path of a homemaker, she received a brilliant education at Harvard. Her parents had high hopes for their daughter, who demonstrated exceptional intelligence. They made every effort to provide her with the best opportunities for development and realizing her potential. The atmosphere of love and support in the family contributed to Tiffany's academic success. Special attention to education quickly yielded results. She graduated from high school with honors and entered university, fulfilling her parents' dreams. The focus on education affected Tiffany's character. She was somewhat introverted, although she knew how to find common ground with people. Those who knew her better valued her sociability, sense of humor, sharp mind, and impeccable manners. During her student years, Tiffany wasn't concerned with romantic relationships. She was completely absorbed in her studies, which she pursued with enthusiasm. Having extraordinary intellectual abilities, she decided to postpone her personal life for the future. When Tiffany turned 40, despite her education and outstanding mental capabilities, she still lived alone in her apartment in Tulsa. Despite a genuine desire to find love, she hadn't succeeded in developing a relationship. Pets played a significant role in her life, 2 cats gifted by friends. They joked that they had grown tired of waiting for her marriage and decided to provide her with reliable company. Tiffany indeed became very attached to her cats, treating them like her own children, and they returned her love. But this wasn't enough for complete happiness. At that time, Tiffany Maher held the position of associate professor in the chemistry department at Northeastern State University. Colleagues and students knew her as a friendly and sociable instructor who could find an approach to everyone. Her lectures were distinguished by their content and interesting delivery, often accompanied by witty jokes. Students particularly noted that her classes were never boring. Everyone who knew Tiffany closely genuinely admired her cheerfulness. In her free time, she found solace in crocheting and enjoyed visiting karaoke with friends. For a long time, solitude didn't burden Tiffany. She completely dedicated herself to professional growth and became one of the most respected professors at the university. While her peers were creating families and raising children, she focused on scientific activities and professional development. However, over the years, her priorities began to change. She became more emotional and sensitive, developing a genuine desire to find a reliable partner who could share her life and support her during difficult moments. Hoping to meet her destiny, Tiffany registered on a dating site. On May 31, 2013, something unusual happened. Tiffany didn't show up for her scheduled lecture. This was reported to her best friend Sarah. Such behavior was completely uncharacteristic for Tiffany, who had never even been late throughout her teaching career. Regardless of circumstances, she always arrived early and carefully prepared for classes. The situation became more concerning when it was discovered that Tiffany hadn't been seen in the department for several days. This caused serious worry among the university administration and colleagues. Sarah, having a day off, decided to check on her friend. During these days, no one could reach Tiffany. She wasn't answering calls, and messages in messengers remained unread. Sarah felt something was wrong, although she tried to push away negative thoughts. Arriving at her friend's house, Sarah noticed several alarming details. On one of the second-floor windows, there were black marks that looked like soot. Tiffany's car, which usually stood in the driveway, was missing. Also, the small window that Tiffany always kept open for her cats so they could freely come and go was closed. Peering through this window, Sarah horrifically saw the motionless body of Tiffany's beloved cat, which appeared to be dead. Alarmed by what she saw, Sarah immediately called 911, not daring to enter the house herself. She described all the suspicious circumstances in detail to the dispatcher. The police who arrived at the scene easily got inside. The front door was unlocked. Inside the house, law enforcement discovered a horrific scene. In different rooms, there were signs of arson attempts, some of which had extinguished themselves, while others failed to ignite. The strongest fire was in the bedroom, where they found the owner's body. Tiffany was lying on the bed lifeless. Her body was mutilated, hands and feet bound, legs severely burned as they were closer to the fire. A pillowcase was over her head, suggesting possible suffocation. The body was covered with a blanket. Strange was the fact that on Tiffany's body, except for the burned legs, they found no injuries. There were no signs of struggle or defensive wounds on her hands and body. After a thorough examination of the crime scene, investigators determined that arson attempts were made in the living room and bedroom. On the first floor under the couch, they found a burned towel, but the fire hadn't spread. A similar arson attempt was made in the bedroom, where the perpetrator had set fire to the lower part of the bed. At the crime scene, police found that many valuable items were missing from the house: a laptop, mobile phone, television, gaming console, and car. Investigators considered robbery as the primary motive for the crime. However, the position of the body on the bed and suspicious marks on the bedding suggested possible assault. Please subscribe to my channel, and I'll bring you more videos featuring the most shocking and true crime stories. The exact conclusion would come from forensic examination. Police announced a citywide search for a red 2011 Ford Fiesta belonging to the victim. While crime scene investigators collected evidence at the scene, detectives questioned neighbors and Tiffany's close associates. The absence of forced entry suggested that the woman knew her killer and had let them into the house willingly. During a conversation with Tiffany's mother, Maria, it was revealed that she had last seen her daughter on May 26, 5 days before the body was discovered. That day, they had gone to a basketball game together. Tiffany had mentioned some evening meeting but didn't share details. According to her mother, her daughter was in her usual mood and had no problems or threats. The autopsy results were inconclusive. The medical examiner had difficulty determining the exact cause of death due to the absence of obvious injuries. Most likely, the woman was killed by prolonged oxygen deprivation, possibly with the pillowcase found on her head. This method of killing takes more time but leaves fewer traces. The examination showed that Tiffany had died before the fire started, as there was no smoke in her lungs. Obviously, the arson was the perpetrator's attempt to destroy evidence. The time of death was established as May 26, the same day her mother had last seen her. The information about the planned meeting on the day of death became an important lead for the investigation. Detectives needed access to the victim's communication devices. Following Tiffany's mother's advice, they searched her university office. Although her personal laptop and phone weren't found there, her work computer was turned on. They discovered Tiffany's profile on a dating site. Her best friend confirmed that Tiffany had been actively seeking romantic relationships lately, despite previous failures. She had been using the popular Canadian dating site Plenty of Fish. Law enforcement contacted the website's administration for information about the deceased's communications. However, because the service was Canadian, obtaining the data required additional bureaucratic procedures. Meanwhile, information about the location of the stolen car came in. Unexpectedly, Tiffany's car was found in the parking lot near her parents' house. This seemed strange, as her parents hadn't noticed their daughter's car that had been parked nearby all this time. A repeated interrogation confirmed their innocence. They had a solid alibi. Investigators suspected that the perpetrator had deliberately left the car near the victim's parents' house, trying to confuse the investigation. Forensics thoroughly examined the car. They found fingerprints and DNA samples on the steering wheel that didn't belong to Tiffany. An important discovery was a toll road pass sticker found in the glove compartment. It had been removed from the windshield after the theft. The pass showed that the car had traveled on the toll road at 11 a.m. on May 26, 2013. Detectives suspected the sticker was removed that same evening, after Tiffany was already dead. The administration of Plenty of Fish dating site provided crucial information. In early May, Tiffany had created a profile and actively communicated with several men. Of particular interest was her intense correspondence with a user nicknamed CaneyFinder1980. This account looked suspicious, without photos or contact information. Notably, it was deactivated the day Tiffany's body was discovered. Investigators analyzed the correspondence between Tiffany, user Later's baby, and CaneyFinder1980. Although the communication was flirtatious, nothing suspicious was found in it. Phone record checks showed frequent calls to one number without a listed contact. Attempts to connect with this number proved futile. Further investigation established that the number belonged to someone who used the pseudonym Big Daddy on another site, the same CaneyFinder1980. The address he provided in Tulsa turned out to be an abandoned commercial building. It was obvious that the perpetrator had carefully concealed his identity. The Big Daddy account was deactivated on May 28, 2 days after Tiffany's death. Interestingly, 3 minutes after deactivation, the profile was re-registered under a new nickname. Since many items were missing from the victim's house, investigators decided to check local pawnshops, where ID is required to sell items. The pawnshop investigation yielded results. One of the employees reported a suspicious man who had pawned items using Tiffany's information. This led to the main suspect, 33-year-old Joshua Schneider from Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. He turned out to be the same Big Daddy who had actively communicated with the victim on the dating site. It was discovered that Schneider had a criminal history. He had served time for car theft, burglary, and crimes. In 1999, he was convicted of. After that, at least one similar case was recorded. Schneider regularly used dating sites to find lonely, vulnerable women whom he would then rob. Meanwhile, he lived with his girlfriend and 2-year-old daughter. When police arrived at Schneider's residence, they didn't find him at home. Communication with his mother yielded no results. She claimed she didn't know her son's whereabouts. Later it was discovered that immediately after the police visit, she had warned her son with a message, effectively becoming an accomplice to the crime. On July 27, 2013, an anonymous friend of the suspect informed police of Schneider's whereabouts. The attempted arrest turned into a chase. The perpetrator, who was in a car with his girlfriend Heather and 2-year-old child, abandoned the vehicle in a wooded area near Tulsa and fled, leaving his family behind. Joshua was only apprehended 10 days later. Tiffany's mobile phone was found among his belongings. Although he denied involvement in the crime, the victim's laptop and other stolen items were found in the house where he lived with his girlfriend. This led to Heather's arrest as an accomplice, and their child was placed in protective services. Schneider's DNA was found on Tiffany's bedsheet and on her car's steering wheel, ultimately confirming his involvement in the crime. After the arrest, the suspect's mother, Karen Griffith, was also brought to the police station. Initially, she denied any involvement, but later admitted to warning her son about the police arrival. However, she continued to deny other charges. In the summer of 2013, Joshua Schneider, then 33 years old, was charged with Tiffany's murder, robbery, and attempting to conceal evidence of the crime. His girlfriend Heather agreed to cooperate with the investigation, which led to all charges against her being dropped. During court hearings, she testified against Schneider, revealing that he had confessed to her about murdering Tiffany and had tried to flee from justice, endangering her and their daughter. Under pressure from Heather's testimony, Schneider began to give statements. According to his version, everything started as ordinary internet flirting that led to a real meeting on that fatal day. He claimed that they initially had consensual sex, followed by conversation. When he confessed about having a girlfriend and child, Tiffany allegedly became furious and threatened to expose their relationship. According to him, an argument broke out that turned into a fight, during which he accidentally pushed Tiffany, and she lost consciousness. Regarding the fire, he denied any involvement, insisting he had left the victim alive. However, the prosecution considered this version a complete lie. In 2015, the investigation fully reconstructed the events of that day. On May 26, Tiffany Maher attended a baseball game with her parents, after which she met with Schneider. She picked him up in her car, and they drove to her house. There, the perpetrator tied up and the woman, then strangled her. Although Schneider insisted on the consensual nature of their relations, the experts' findings refuted this claim. After the murder, the perpetrator robbed the house and attempted to destroy evidence by arson but, fortunately, fled before ensuring his plan's success. Experts identified 2 points of ignition, in the bedroom and living room. The fire in the bedroom damaged the victim's body, complicating the work of forensics. Schneider left Tiffany's stolen car near her parents' house, hoping to confuse the investigation. He managed to pawn some of the stolen items, some of which were later returned to the victim's family. The court-appointed lawyer tried to mitigate the sentence, citing Schneider's young age during his first crime and a difficult childhood marked by paternal abuse. However, these arguments seemed unconvincing given the brutality of the crime committed. Throughout the proceedings, the defendant remained indifferent and showed no signs of remorse. The jury found Joshua Schneider guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for murder, plus 2 additional consecutive life terms for arson and theft. During the trial, the prosecution also informed the jury about Schneider's previous convictions and his possible involvement in another murder, a woman named Martha, whom he had met online and who was later found dead in her home, although that crime remained unsolved. Analysis of the perpetrator's method led law enforcement to connect Joshua to this brutal murder. However, the accused continued to firmly deny any involvement in the crime, and his lawyer actively worked on appealing the court decision. The defense representative persistently argued that the evidence presented during the 8 days of court hearings was insufficient for such a severe sentence, 3 life imprisonments. The defense considered it paradoxical that denying the right to parole was viewed as an extremely lenient punishment for a murderer. The lawyer also questioned the professionalism of the investigators who handled the case. He put forward a theory that Tiffany's death could have been the result of a tragic accident or unintentional killing, arguing that the victim had invited Joshua to her home herself. The defense's persistent work led to a case review. The lawyer was convinced this would provide his client with a fair trial. He insisted that the defendant's constitutional rights had been violated during the investigation, and law enforcement was simply looking for a scapegoat. Joshua, with his history of violent crimes, perfectly fit that role. The new trial was meant to correct previous mistakes. The defense claimed that the jury hadn't been presented with all evidence collected during the investigation. The lawyers even proposed an alternative version, naming Heather, Joshua's girlfriend, as the possible killer. According to their version, upon learning of her boyfriend's infidelity, she had a strong motive for revenge. However, Heather was able to prove her innocence. The second trial ended the same way. Joshua remained in custody. He is currently serving his sentence at Davis Correctional Facility, located in Holdenville, Oklahoma. But the lawyer didn't stop fighting, changing tactics to appeal to sympathy. He emphasized that the convict had a 2-year-old child who risked becoming an orphan. The defense insisted that Schneider couldn't have committed such a crime because he loved his son deeply and didn't want to end up behind bars again, losing the opportunity to communicate with his child and participate in their upbringing. Repeated attempts to shift blame to Heather also yielded no results. The court left the sentence unchanged. After Tiffany's tragic death, her contribution to science was recognized with a posthumous legacy award established by Northeastern State University. This honor is awarded annually to teachers for outstanding achievements in their field. Tiffany's professional path was connected to healthcare and teaching chemistry. She actively published in scientific journals and completed a significant amount of important research work, which, unfortunately, remained unfinished due to her untimely death. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments what you think about this case. And if you enjoy deep dives into true crime, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Until next time, friends.